When William was born in Normandy around 1028, no one could have imagined that this child, called the Bastard by his own people, would one day reshape the face of England forever. He was the son of Robert the Devil, Duke of Normandy, and Herleva, a tanner's daughter from Falaise. His birth out of wedlock should have doomed him in a world obsessed with bloodlines and legitimacy. Yet from his earliest years, William's life was forged in danger. When his father died during a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, the boy was only 7. Instantly, Normandy erupted in chaos. Powerful barons, hungry for control, saw a child duke as an invitation to rebellion. Assassins haunted William's steps. His guardians were murdered one by one. But somehow, through cunning and luck, he survived them all. He grew up in a world of violence and shifting loyalties, a boy surrounded by blades. He learned quickly that trust was a currency too costly to spend. As a teenager, William fought to hold on to his inheritance. Every village, every fortress he controlled, had to be defended with both sword and strategy. He grew strong and hard in this struggle, gaining a reputation for discipline and ruthlessness that never left him. His enemies learned to fear his patience as much as his sword. By his 20s, William had stabilized Normandy. He ruled with a firm hand, punishing rebellion and rewarding loyalty. Yet even as he secured his duchy, his eyes began to turn across the Channel, to England. The English crown at that time was ruled by Edward the Confessor, a man with Norman ties. Legend says Edward had once promised William the throne, grateful for Norman support during his exile. Whether this promise was real or merely rumored didn't matter. To William, it was destiny. England was a rich land full of fertile fields and powerful earls. But it was also divided, uncertain, and weak. When Edward died childless in 1066, a storm broke. Harold Godwinson, England's most powerful noble, seized the crown. To William, this was treachery. In his mind, Harold was not a king. He was a usurper. William gathered his council in Normandy and declared his right to rule England. The Pope himself sent a banner of blessing, turning what could have been a war of ambition into a holy cause. All summer, William prepared. He built ships, trained men, forged weapons, and stockpiled supplies. His army was a mix of Normans, Bretons, and mercenaries, disciplined, hungry, and loyal to his promise of land and glory. Across the sea, Harold was fighting his own battles. In the north, a Viking army led by Harold Hardrada invaded England. Harold Godwinson rushed north, crushed the Vikings at Stamford Bridge in a brutal fight, and then, exhausted, turned south again, because William had landed. On September 28, 1066, the Normans came ashore at Pevensey. They burned what they could not take and built wooden fortifications in record time. The invasion had begun. William's timing was ruthless. He struck just as Harold's army was bloodied and worn from battle. But Harold marched again, covering nearly 200 miles in less than 2 weeks, gathering what men he could. Their armies met on a hill near Hastings. The morning of October 14th was cold and clear. Harold's men took the high ground, forming a solid wall of shields, the famous Anglo-Saxon defense. William's forces gathered below, their horses restless, their banners snapping in the wind. For hours, the Normans charged the English line, only to be driven back again and again. Arrows rained down but could not break the wall. Then came a moment that nearly ended William's dream. His line wavered, and a rumor spread that he was dead. Panic rippled through his men. William did what only a true commander could. He tore off his helmet, rode to the front, and shouted, "Look at me, I live, and by God's grace I will conquer." His men rallied, the chaos turned to resolve, and the tide began to shift. William used a trick, a feigned retreat. The English, thinking the Normans were fleeing, chased them downhill, breaking their perfect formation. That was their undoing. The Norman cavalry turned and crushed them. Harold fought bravely to the end, struck by an arrow, then surrounded and cut down. By nightfall, the field was silent except for the crows. Thousands lay dead. The Saxon age had ended. William, the Bastard of Normandy, was now William the Conqueror, but his victory was not yet secure. To the English people, he was still a foreign invader. Towns rebelled, earls plotted, and the north seethed with resistance. William responded as he always had, with absolute force. He marched across the land, burning crops, razing villages, and building castles wherever he went. He ruled through fear, but also through order. He rewarded his Norman knights with English lands, replacing the old Anglo-Saxon aristocracy with his own men. The castles that began to rise, stone by stone, became the symbols of a new world. Each one a reminder of his control, each one a mark of Norman power. London fell soon after Hastings, and on Christmas Day 1066, William was crowned King of England at Westminster Abbey. As the crown touched his head, a cheer went up from the church, and the Norman guards outside, thinking it was an uprising, set fire to nearby houses. Even in his triumph, chaos followed him. William brought more than conquest to England. He brought transformation. Under his rule, the English language began to change, absorbing French words and structure. Law, architecture, and administration were reshaped in the Norman image. The old order was gone, replaced by a new one that mixed Saxon roots with continental sophistication. Yet beneath this progress ran a deep current of resentment. To the conquered, he was no hero. He was a foreign tyrant, a destroyer of their world. To his followers, he was the man who gave them the kingdom. In the years that followed, William struggled to balance both realms, his native Normandy and his hard-won England. He ruled between them like a man walking a tightrope. Rebellions flared, enemies conspired, and always, his iron will held it all together. But beneath that iron exterior was a man who had never known peace. The boy who had escaped assassins, the duke who had survived betrayals, the conqueror who had defied the odds. All of it had shaped him into something both great and terrible. By the end of his reign, William had changed not only England, but Europe itself. The map of power was redrawn, the foundations of a new empire laid. And yet, in his heart, he remained the boy from Normandy who had learned too young that survival came only through strength. His story was not just of conquest, but of endurance. The kind that comes from knowing the world owes you nothing and taking it anyway. As William grew older, the weight of ruling two restless lands began to harden him even more. England was never easy to hold. Every year brought new threats, new rebellions, new whispers of resistance. The North especially refused to bow. They saw William not as their king, but as a foreign occupier who had taken their world by force. When the people there rose up with the help of Danish invaders, William answered with the harshest punishment England had ever seen. What followed would stain his name for centuries. He marched north with fire and steel, burning villages, salting fields, destroying anything that might sustain life. This devastation became known as the harrying of the North. It was not a battle, but a slow suffocation. Entire regions starved. Survivors wandered through snow-covered ruins searching for food. William believed he had no choice, that mercy would only invite more revolt, but even his own chroniclers struggled to defend him. It was one of those moments where his strength turned into something darker, something cold and frightening. Despite the brutality, William still believed he was bringing order, not chaos. He wanted a kingdom ruled by law, not by the whims of nobles. To tighten his grip on England, he ordered a massive survey of every field, every animal, every village and family in the land. Scribes traveled across the country, carefully counting resources and recording them. The result was the Domesday Book, a record so exact that people said it felt like being judged by God himself. Every tax, every obligation, every claim was written down. It became both a tool of justice and a reminder of William's absolute authority. Nothing in England escaped his notice. Yet even with England and Normandy under his hand, William was not a man living in peace. His family, the only people he might have trusted, brought him constant trouble. His eldest son, Robert, called Robert Curthose, wanted to rule Normandy. William refused. To him, Robert was spoiled, impulsive, easily misled. Their relationship rotted over time, turning bitter and violent. At one point, Robert even joined William's enemies and rode against his father in battle. William was struck so deeply by the betrayal that he wept after the fighting ended. He had conquered nations, but he could not control his own son. His other sons, William Rufus and Henry, watched the family conflict quietly, waiting to see what future came their way. William's wife, Matilda, whom he had deeply loved, died before him, and her absence left a loneliness he never spoke of. She had been a calming force in his life, one of the very few people he openly trusted. After her death, something inside him seemed to tighten, as if the world had lost its only gentle place. The older William became, the more he seemed haunted by the ghosts of the people he had ruled with such force. Chroniclers described moments when he appeared restless, pacing, unable to sleep. His health began to fail. His once powerful body grew heavy. He lost the speed and strength that had carried him through so many battles. But even weakened, he could not sit still. He spent his final years moving back and forth between England and Normandy, settling disputes, putting down uprisings, demanding loyalty from men who feared him as much as they respected him. His last campaign came in France, where he burned towns that had insulted him. But as he rode through the flames, his horse reared, and William was thrown forward onto the iron pommel of his saddle. What seemed like a simple injury soon became something far worse. His stomach became swollen and infected. Fever took over. The mighty conqueror, the king who had changed the map of Europe, was now bedridden. He lay in a monastery in Rouen, surrounded not by cheering soldiers or loyal nobles, but by the reality that all men, even the greatest kings, end the same way, helpless and fading. There, on a warm September morning in 1087, William the Conqueror died. And in that moment, the fragile balance he had held together with force and determination collapsed. His sons rushed to claim their shares of his lands. Servants, fearful of the chaos that would follow, abandoned the room. Some even stole valuables from his bedside. When monks finally returned to move his body, they found the church too small for his swollen frame. As they tried to lower him into his tomb, his remains burst open, filling the chapel with a stench so terrible that witnesses gagged and fled. For a man who had inspired so much fear and awe, the indignity of his burial seemed almost like a final reminder that no ruler can escape the truth of mortality. Yet death could not erase what he had built. England would never be the same after William. The Norman language blended with Anglo-Saxon speech, eventually forming the English we know today. Norman castles dotted the landscape, shaping the identity of towns and cities. The feudal system he established restructured power for generations. And though many cursed his name, others admired his vision, his discipline, and his ability to hold together lands that had always resisted unity. History remembers him in two ways, as the man who brought order and the man who brought fire. A ruler of enormous talent and enormous cruelty. A king who believed deeply in his right to rule and stopped at nothing to defend it. He carved his legacy with a sword, but also with laws, administration, and relentless will. The story of William the Conqueror is not simple. It is the story of a child born into danger, who survived by growing stronger than everyone who wanted him dead. It is the story of an ambitious duke who crossed a stormy sea and defeated a kingdom that had stood for centuries. It is the story of a ruler whose triumphs built a new world, and whose harshness left scars that lasted long after he was gone. In the end, William reshaped Europe not because he was destined to, but because he refused to be pushed aside. Every hardship he faced as a child, every betrayal, every rebellion he crushed, every castle he built, all of it fed the force that drove him. He ruled with iron because iron had been the only thing that kept him alive. For better or worse, he believed he was chosen to reshape the world, and he acted as if nothing could stop him. Nearly 1,000 years later, his shadow still lies across England. Every hill with a castle, every law shaped by his system, every echo of the languages he merged, all of it carries a trace of the man who came from Normandy and refused to bow. William the Conqueror is long gone, but the world he made has never truly disappeared.